everybody. This is Joe Joseph, and this is your DailySheeple.com Daily News Brief. And let's get started here. I want to start with the Daily News. There was an article that came out today in the New York Daily News that kind of caught my attention. If we remember Eric Gardner was the guy that was standing on the street selling bootleg cigarettes when NYPD came up from behind him, chokeholded him, and he ended up having a heart attack and he passed away. And obviously excessive force. Nobody was held accountable for it. And it caused considerable backlash, not just from the community, but also certainly raised a lot of awareness as it pertains to police brutality. And Erica Garner, his daughter, blasted the Clinton campaign because there was WikiLeaks emails that came out that showed that their campaign discussed how to use her father's death to advance gun legislation. And she just found it sickening. If you remember back in 2006, 2007, there was something called the Ron Paul Revolution that took off. And at one point in time in 2007, there was a 1 million man march that actually took place where there was close to 1 million people that marched on Washington. And it was a tremendous grassroots effort and uprising that took place. And not soon after that, you had the Tea Party take off. And that Tea Party was kind of like the Ron Paul Revolution and some of your more centrist slant, maybe a little more to the right, Republican type individuals. And then it got co-opted. And the powers that shouldn't be put their operators in there, their operatives. They got in there, they totally took it over. And now the Tea Party today is nothing but your mainstream Republican operation that advances the Republican Party platform and all that. Certainly not what Ron Paul was doing. Certainly doesn't have the Constitution in mind. It's certainly not across the board. And Erica Garner was talking about this same thing. This is the Daily News. It says, Erica Garner, the daughter of police chokehold victim Eric Garner, ripped Hillary Clinton's campaign in a series of tweets Thursday after new campaign emails released by WikiLeaks show how the Democratic nominee staffers discussed the death of her father. Quote, she said, I'm troubled by the revelation that you and this campaign actually discussed using Eric Garner. Why would you want to, quote, use my dad? She says these people will co-opt anything to push their agenda. Police violence is not the same as gun violence. She's absolutely right. Although I will say that the police use gun violence more than I would say silly villains do. That's for darn sure. Oh, yeah, I didn't mean to shoot him in the head while his hands were up. Yeah, that's right. She says, I'm very interested to know exactly what at Corey Chiari meant when he said, I know we have an Erica Garner problem in the Podesta emails. An Erica Garner problem. I can tell you what that means. The powers that shouldn't be will go to no ends to co-opt anything that they can use to their benefit. Even if it's people that are protesting for legitimate purposes and legitimate reasons. And this is one. I mean, a guy selling cigarettes on the street is certainly no reason to kill the man. I don't care how long his rap sheet is. Half the people out there with rap sheets don't deserve them in the first place because these crimes shouldn't be crimes in the first place. There's an old adage, no victim, no crime. It's the basis of law when this country was founded. If there isn't an injured party on the other side, then there's no crime. And it was only until the Act of 1871 here in the United States, when people became corporations, and the United States was incorporated, that this became possible. And it's unfortunate. It's truly unfortunate that we've allowed this to go on for so long. This is why all these petty drug crimes are allowed to be prosecuted and people put in jail for something stupid. In most cases, for a plant. For horticulture. I mean, come on. It's ridiculous. And what's one thing that we've learned throughout this whole thing? Say the last 100 years. Prohibition doesn't work. Never has. Never will. And that the people here, especially prosecuting people for petty drug crimes, are on the wrong side of history. Look at what happened with alcohol. At one time, alcohol was illegal. People were being put in jail. People were being poisoned and killed by our own government. Look up the federal poisoning program. Our federal government killed over 10,000 people because of alcohol. They were poisoning the alcohol to, quote, scare people into not drinking. How asinine is that? It's murderous. It's treacherous. It's treasonous. It's everything. It sucks. It's unbelievable. And yet, what do? Nothing. At least now there's a groundswell of support. And I hope that the decriminalization of not just marijuana, but all drugs take place. And that instead of trying to combat it by throwing people in jail, about feeding the military-industrial complex, the pharmaceutical-industrial complex, the police state, the lawyers, instead of feeding all these people that don't need to be fed, how about instead we educate people as to the uses of these plants, of these herbs, of these drugs? Let them understand the dangers, because if you educate people, they tend to make better decisions. Take a look at what's going on over in Amsterdam right now. I mean, are there people just all over the streets with needles hanging out of their arms? And, dead people all over the place? No, of course not. So how is it okay over there? What, are Europeans smarter than Americans? Probably not. It's all about how we educate people. And once we educate people and put a good education process in place, everything's going to be okay. But as long as there's profiteering involved by the powers that shouldn't be, a la Bush and Clinton's, same thing's going to go on. Same thing's going to go on. And, that what they'll also say is, well, economic downturns, that's why people turn to drugs. They lose their jobs. They become drug addicts. Now, I don't think that would happen, but I can tell you, we're ripe for something. We're less than 2 weeks away from the elections, like a week and a half. And there's economic indicators all over the place saying that this may happen. You've got active duty and reservist military getting ready to drill at all the mock cities across America, getting ready for civil unrest. Should it happen? Look, no matter who wins, Trump or Clinton, you can bet there's going to be some pissed off individuals. Down in Venezuela, SHTFplan.com has mirrored a Zero Hedge article. It says Venezuela's collapse, unleashing hyperinflation as worthless cash necessitates 200 times bigger bills. It's Weimar all over again. It says, while several years ago, it was perhaps debatable in polite society that Venezuela's socialist economy would collapse, ultimately unleashing hyperinflation, any doubt was put to rest early this year when the IMF's own inflationary forecast confirmed as much. They're saying that their inflation by 2019 is going to reach close to 3,500%. 3,500%. That's staggering. Meanwhile, here in the United States, you've got the Fed pushing some really, really shaky monetary policy. They're saying, let's keep the interest rates extraordinarily low so that, it doesn't matter. 2% inflation, go higher. It's all good. It doesn't take much for a contagion to kind of work its way in there. And then when it does, it's very hard to stop. We remember what happened with the Lehman Brothers collapse. And then the ultimate recovery that happened there afterwards, which was never really happened in the first place, right? Isn't that interesting? And we're ripe for another one again. Oh, yeah, there's the economy's in a recovery. We've never recovered. We have not seen 3% growth this entire administration, yet we're just supposed to believe it's going to go on. Even at the best of times, our economy's cyclical. It's peaks and valleys, peaks and valleys. And they say the benefit of a central bank is, to control that. They can't control it anymore. Not unless they put in some other measures. And what are they going to do? Negative interest rates? You think that's going to help? I don't think so. There's also indicators. Amazon today fell short of earnings. Amazon, think about that. And not just by a little. They earned 52 cents a share, revenue $32.71 billion, but the expectations were 78 cents. That's huge. That's a huge short. I mean, they fell way short. So what does that say, especially going into the holiday season? If e-commerce is crapping out, what do you think? The stores are going to do any better? I mean, that's where you get the deals, right? eBay, Amazon. If they can't do it, what makes you think the malls are going to do it? It's crazy. Over in the Midwest, Activist Post has a great piece, and this is something that's not getting covered nearly enough. And this has to do with the protests at Standing Rock to protest the Dakota Access Pipeline. My good friend Gwen Caldwell, she helped me co-host the radio from time to time, and she's really up on this. Activist Post is up on this. They say a no-fly zone has been declared as militarized police prep for an assault on the frontline camp at Standing Rock. I mean, this is crazy. This is across sacred Indian burial grounds and cultural sites. They're trying to protect their water supply. Because, we've become so civilized in the 21st century that we would never spill anything. The EPA has our best interest at heart. You remember that river that just ran with like toxic gunk that turned it gold or yellow and nobody got held accountable for it? No, nothing like that, right? Never happens here in America. It says pipeline opponents attempting to protect their water supply from Dakota Access Oil Pipeline, as well as prevent the continued destruction of burial grounds and cultural sites, are anticipating a confrontation with the police either today or tomorrow. And this news comes after water protectors refuse law enforcement requests to vacate reoccupied land in the pipeline's path, owned by Dallas-based Energy Transfer Partners. Last week, Native activists took the bold action of declaring eminent domain over their traditional territory and set up a new camp called Frontline. Directly in the pipeline's path, pipeline opponents say they have simply reclaimed the land under the Fort Laramie Treaty of 1851, clearly noting the Sioux never ceded that territory. The new encampment lies across Highway 1806, where pipeline security guards, armed with guard dogs and pepper spray, attacked protesters attempting to stop the bulldozing of cultural sites and burial grounds on September 3rd. The impending crisis comes after nearly 200 water protectors set up the new camp on the land that Energy Transfer Partners last month purchased from a local rancher in an effort to bolster strategic and tactical control of areas surrounding the construction of the controversial pipeline. But, now this is interesting. According to the Associated Press, the Native Americans claim that their land is theirs by way of an 1851 treaty is not going to stop them. Isn't that interesting? How our government, and of course we should expect nothing less from our government. Just because you have a treaty or an agreement with the government doesn't mean they have to honor it. You may have to honor it, but they don't have to honor it. And that's exactly what's going on here. They're not going to honor anything, especially when special interests want their money. And if it's costing their bubbas money, then they're going to do whatever it takes to make sure that they get these protesters out of the way. This is how it works. And they're stopping at nothing to ratchet up on the control. Look, we have like I said, we have an election a week and a half away. Anything can happen after the fact. They have a control grid in place. They have a police state in place. That control grid is becoming more and more of a necessary tool for them to be able to ratchet down immediately. Even Facebook. Last week we talked about facial recognition. Mike Krieger over at libertyblitzkrieg.com had a great report about facial recognition and how there's very little protections in place as far as the use of this technology. And he had a update, and he says, while millions of internet users embrace the tagging of family and friends in photos, others worried there's something devious afoot or trying to block Facebook as well as Google from amassing such data. There's now a lawsuit pending about the use of this. And the companies are insisting that gathering data on what you look like isn't against the law, even without your permission. Privacy advocates are saying that that's not the case. So they took it to court. Now, if a judge agrees with Facebook and Google, they may be able to kill off lawsuits filed under a unique Illinois law that carries fines of $1,000 to $5,000 each time a person's image is used without their permission. Big enough for a liability headache if claims on behalf of millions of consumers proceed as class action. Think about that. The losses, I would say, would be staggering. So they're going to do whatever they can to try and stave it off. But it's also a necessary part of the control grid. Facial recognition. Law enforcement uses Facebook's utilities all the time. Same with Google. It's all tied together. Even at airports. According to CBS Detroit, there's a new system out there called Clear. It's a new technology that they're using at Detroit's Metro Airport that allows travelers to move through security lines in a flash. Get this. It's a problem reaction solution, right? So you have 9/11, and 9/11 causes a big bureaucracy to take place, to come out, the Department of Homeland Security and the TSA. Makes traveling by air a nightmare. Having to go to the airport hours in advance just to make your flight, just so you can get through security lines for a threat that doesn't exist. And so people get pissed. And as soon as something comes along that's convenient, man, they hook right to it. They're like, oh boy, yeah, I'll do this. If I can get right on the plane, no problem, I'll do it. Well, this system is called Clear. And it's now in operation at the McNamara terminal, certified as a qualified anti-terrorism technology by the U.S. Department of Homeland Security. Clear has been used more than 5 million times to move travelers more quickly through airport security lines at 16 other airports. Membership to use Clear, get this. This is what's crazy. People pay to use it $179 a year to enroll and to have your biometric data stored and your fingerprints and all this stored so that you just walk right through and it recognizes who you are, and you have to take a knowledge-based quiz that they use as a government identification that validates using the technology and ties you to everything and your biometrics. They may ask you a question or two. You answer it right, you pass right on through. But you got to pay. Look at how our rights, how people are ceding their rights for convenience when that inconvenience shouldn't even be there in the first place. Problem, reaction, solution. The Hegelian dialectic. It's well over, it's close to 200 years old and still being used today and very effectively. Folks, the mindset's got to change. And you can't expect that the mainstream media is going to give you the right scoop. You can't trust these outlets anymore. You know, it was David Rockefeller, in closing, I'll say this. David Rockefeller at the Bilderberg meeting in 1991 who said this, quote, "We are grateful for the Washington Post, the New York Times, Time Magazine, and other great publications, whose directors have attended our meetings and respected their promises of discretion for almost 40 years. It would have been impossible for us to develop our plans for the world if we had been subjected to the lights of publicity during those years, but the world is now more sophisticated and prepared to march towards a world government. The supranational sovereignty of an intellectual elite, yes, and more world bankers is surely preferable to the national autodetermination practice in past centuries." And with that, my friends, have a great weekend. This was your dailysheeple.com Daily News Brief. I'll see you next week.